basement, Josh.
I'm literally inside of a utility room, Dave. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Am I supposed to say Dave the drummer because I'm talking to Dave the drummer right now? Do I call you Henry? I mean, what are we supposed to do here?
Henry's
good.
Henry's good.
Yeah.
Where did Dave the drummer? Where did that emanate from? What was the idea behind it?
Oh God!
You know, it's the most boring story in the world.
Perfect.
Because
That's an excellent.
really, because I just couldn't think of anything better to say at the time. I think somebody asked me, like, I did a track a long time ago which never came out, and they asked me what I was going to call myself, and I'd been called Dave the drummer because I was playing drums in a band at the time, and it was kind of become my nickname for a bit of a laugh. And that was it. So I just said, I'll call myself Dave the drummer. And then it just kind of stuck. And then we did all the Liberator records and stuff like that. And that kind of became my artist name. And that was it.
Did I miss something? So why not Henry the drummer? Why was it Dave? And Dave has...
because the guitarist in the band was called Fraggle. But his real name was Dave. So we used to take the piss out of him, like call him Dave deliberately, and it would annoy him, and then everyone became sort of Dave the singer, and Dave the drummer, and Dave the guitarist, and Dave the bass player, and we all became Dave for a bit. And the Dave the drummer thing just sort of stuck with me. I don't know why. None of the others kept it going, but for some reason I did. So yeah, that's why it ended up being called Dave, and not Henry the drummer. It was because we're just used to enjoy winding up our guitarist, who's still called Fraggle, by the way, but his real name is Dave.
Are you still in this band? Is this band still in operation?
Yeah, actually, yeah. I know. We just recorded some tracks. Actually, they're all right. Yeah, Back to the Planet. Name of the band is.
What's the source of Fraggle? I hear the word Fraggle and I think about this Jim Henson.
Fraggle Rock.
Puppet show, Fraggle Rock.
I don't know why he called himself Fraggle. I always thought Fraggle Rock as well. And I thought like some little thing with like little googly eyes and loads of hair. Did you
have the hair? Did you have the big band hair? Like essentially what I'm rocking, right? I call my style Captain COVID because I can't.
You just let it go wild, haven't
There's
you?
nothing. I'll tell you what. This is the truth. The truth is that I've been doing homeschooling with.
Have you?
Yeah, I mean, okay. There's no choice. It's all shut down.
Doing that too.
You know, my daughter, she just turned 6, and I don't want stuff to just slip. So, you know, I've got the workbooks going out. We're doing the actual homeschooling stuff. Her school has provided us a laptop for her.
Okay.
Which I was very thankful about.
Yeah.
York
Is it a good
Region
one?
District School. But, otherwise it was going to be on the utility room book, and that would be a problem. You just know right away, like something's going to go wrong, you know. And what do you do at that point? You can't be like and pull the hair out. You got to be like, oh, that really sucks, darling. I wish you wouldn't have done that. You know, like when you stub your toe really badly in front of your 3-year-old for the first time, and you can't say fuck.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I remember I bought Alec his first laptop. He's 17 now, Alec, my son, and so he's yeah. I mean, all the kids have been affected by COVID, aren't they? I mean, he is being affected because he should really be signing up to go to university, and he has been. But obviously uni's supposed to start in September this year, and well, there's a lot of conjecture as to whether it's going to start or whether they're just going to go for distance learning, which so far, from what I've heard, has been a bit of a disaster. Really, most universities haven't really been able to keep up with the demand or organize or structure their lessons properly, and of course people are paying an absolute fortune. But sorry, back to the subject of laptops. I remember when I first got my son a laptop, and it was a Windows, and I cut some corners. I thought, I'll get him a Windows one because there's no point getting him a Mac, even though I'm a Mac guy really. I thought I'll get him a Windows one because it's cheap. And of course the first thing he did was he just got it immediately, just got attacked by he tried to download as much bad sort of malware as he possibly could, and it's just got totally virused. And of course, I had to get in there and sort of clean it all out. And I said, "Now, Alec, now look, now when you go up on these websites to download, because he was really into gaming. When you go on these websites to try and just try not to go on to this one, try and find the actual website for the actual game. He's like, yeah, Dad, all right. And then because he was just like completely virused, over and over again. He did it over and over again. I had to clean it out. I was like, oh Jesus. So anyway, he's over that now, thank God. Yeah.
It makes me think that some of the malware marketing people should be in charge of some bigger marketing projects, because they seem
Yeah,
to snag the
they're good
attention
at
of
it.
the general public so many times. Be like, I don't want to press this button, but I'm going to press this button. And if you're
Yeah,
able to make somebody do that, I'm like, that's a great hat trick, especially if you're online.
it is.
Yeah, you're like
It
reaching into
is.
the hearts and minds of people and being like, you need to press this. This needs to be in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's weird, isn't it? I mean, and PCs are so bad for it. Like Mac it's so much easier, but I'm not going to get into the Mac versus PC thing. Sorry,
I
I just closed a spreadsheet now, so you'll see that I'm not quite as well lit as I was. But, but I had to close it because I'm doing a spreadsheet at the moment. It's really exciting stuff. I'm
right.
sitting in the studio surrounded by musical equipment, and
And
I'm
you're
doing a
doing the
spreadsheet
spreadsheet. I
on
actually want to talk
numbers.
really
Yeah.
quick about the gear. What have you got? What have you got behind you? What are your true go-to pieces that you're grabbing when you're creating music?
What have I got in here? Well, it's not as impressive as it used to be, but it's not bad. I built it back up after sort of ditching loads of kit years ago and sort of trying to go in the box, and probably being a little bit too quick off the mark to try and do that. So, because to be honest, back then the computers weren't anywhere near as I mean, I'm talking 10 years ago. The computers weren't anywhere near as quick as they are now. And if you were going to go in the box, I'd probably suggest doing it now,
Back then,
not
10
10
years
years ago.
ago.
10 years ago was actually really difficult. So, but yeah, no, I've got some synths over here. I've got a sequential Pro one and an SH1 on. Yeah, like you can see that over there.
Thank you.
And then over here, I've got drum machine TRAS, which is really amazing actually, and the go-to synth is this actually, the Virus, which has just come back from being repaired. It packed up the other day. Had to take it to a friend's place, and he fixed it up for me. Thank you, Mark, who fixed that up. And it was some problem with the power. It was just turning on, off and on. And I sort of said to him, oh, it's all right. It's no rush. Don't worry. To do it when you can. Of course, the day after I got home, after dropping it down there, I was like, I really wanted to use it. It's like one of these. I sort of realised I felt like I sort of had a finger chopped off. So that is my go-to synth at the moment. The Access Virus C, and it's brilliant. And it's just been like, I've just got it back. It's all working perfectly, and it's all got brand new. It's all got factory presets in it now,
What was the
which is
first
which.
piece? What was your first piece for electronic music? I mean, otherwise, I'm sure you'd be talking about
Um,
a bass guitar or a drum, or I don't mean actual
it
band. I
would
mean, not say that
be.
electronic music can't be band pieces. It can, but specifically for rave, actually, tell you what, scratch that. When did you get into raving?
When did I get into raving? When well, it's funny because the band that I was in, like I said, we were around on the sort of squat scene in the UK. We had that kind of squatter scene that I don't know if you really had it over in Canada quite as much as maybe we did, but obviously we had a legal loophole that we used to exploit, and in the 80s, where you were allowed to live in empty buildings as long as no one else could kind of claim them, and they had to go through quite a lengthy legal process to get you out. It wasn't just a question of the police showing up and booting the door in and chucking you out. They technically weren't allowed to do that, although sometimes they did. But most of the time, you were allowed to live places, and because of that, there was a quite a healthy squat scene, and people used to bust into quite big buildings like warehouses, and in one case, a squatted dole office, which is where I lived, and my band started off in this squatted dole office, a dole office being like an unemployment benefit office, and it was obviously it's a big sort of government building full of offices, and we turned all the little office rooms into bedrooms, and the main halls where people would queue up to receive their unemployment benefits were sort of stripped down and it turned into gig halls, and the place would hold about probably about 400 or 500 people in total. So it was relatively big, and we had bands in the hall upstairs. And Back to the Planet was um, my band, but also we were the sort of in-house band, and mainly because I owned a drum kit, and nobody else did, and we had the rave downstairs, and we used to get like electronic DJs used to come in and play downstairs, and of course I used to live in the building, so I'd be in and out of both rooms,
Where
the
was the
rave
power
thing was
supply
always
coming
around.
from, Henry? Where was the power coming from for you
It
guys to get
it
this?
was. Yeah, it was all hooked up to the regular power. I mean, yeah, occasionally to get you out, sometimes the power company would show up and literally dig up the road and dig up the power cables and just turn you off. Occasionally, but to be honest with you, most of the time they didn't. And actually, you could normally set up even though you weren't technically allowed to live there, because of the legal loophole, because it wasn't illegal, it was unlawful, and because of that, you were allowed to start an account with the service providers. So we used to get in touch with the electricity board, and you go and start an account. Someone would have to
What?
have yeah, you'd have to go and give them a name, and you'd have to pay them. But if you did it, they'd leave you alone. And if they left you alone, there you go. You got a place. So and the owners would have to apply to the courts to get you out, and it could take months,
And during
years. In
that
fact,
time,
I
you
think.
guys are partying.
Yeah, doing whatever you want. Yeah, basically, yeah. And so the building belonged to the government, of course. It took them ages to get us out because the governments never do anything very quickly, do they? Let's face it. So yeah, took them about 18 months, I think. And so in the meantime, we were in there. Yeah, we did a gig at one point, like it was every couple of weeks, I think. Yeah,
Was
every
this
couple of weeks.
was this the birth for you and raving, or was this the birth of raving in the UK? Was it both?
It was a little bit of both, yeah, because it was about 1988. This was so, yeah. It was kind of the birth of raving, and my band thing and this squat culture thing was all connected to the free traveling scene as well that was happening in the UK at the time, and what the before ravers came along, it was just bands. But then ravers kind of attached themselves to the free party movement, which was all a bunch of hippies, which is kind of and anarcho punks, and which is kind of the scene I was on. But ravers kind of attached themselves to that scene because it was a good way to organise a party, and the Travellers were good at organising parties. Who the Travellers later became kind of the squatters in the cities, and they started organising parties, and ravers were into that. So you could get DJs to come down, and with the DJs came the ravers, and so the whole scene sort of switched from being all about bands, and it switched to becoming all about electronic music. Which at first I really resisted because I didn't like it, because really the band gigs used to be the big hall, and the rave thing used to be the little room, and it slowly changed as rave got much more popular, and live bands weren't really, and the live band thing got really driven underground, and lots of venues followed suit as well. They got rid of all their live equipment, they got rid of their microphones, got rid of the staging and all that stuff, and they just literally got a set of decks, and they got DJs in every weekend. That was what I remember happening, and yeah, I was really into electronic music, but I was finding the whole transition between live and electronic music, in as far as raving, I was finding that a bit of a bitter pill to swallow, because yeah, it was tough to sort of reconcile that, because yeah, I was thinking, well, I don't want to contribute to the death of live music, but at the same time. Yeah, I do. Well, there were a few little things of there's quite a yeah. I can't get. I mean, I've always liked electronic music. I grew up in the '80s, so things like Kraftwerk and Duran Duran and things like that. I mean, it's horrible to mention them both in the same sentence, but you know that all that sort of '80s pop, Yazoo and and the Eurythmics and all those things were all around. They were obviously that was all my childhood. So I loved electronic music, but then for me, I think it was like Hard Floor or something like that. That was when I really made the transition from being like an electro pop kid who had played in a band to someone who really wanted to make techno and really wanted to really started to understand what was going on on the dance floor, and then going out and seeing friends of mine playing, hardcore records and Mister and Tim and things like that. I mean, it was more the sort of hard trance scene, I think you'd call it now, although everyone calls that techno now. But yeah, I mean, yeah, that was a definite dig. Absolutely, 100%. You Tech, it was one of the labels I used to work for. Yeah. I was creating a fair bit of music for other people in general at that time. Yeah. Henry Cullen. And what's his face? Yeah, I know. Yeah, I did a lot of sessions with all sorts of people, really. And I mean, towards as time went on, I started, getting a slightly better sort of placement in the credits, and people offering me a slightly better deal, and as far as the money went and all that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I did a lot of sessions with the guys that ran Eucatech, and it was kind of generally the way that things went. And then occasionally I had the odd guest, and and that would normally come through Nils or Hans, the two guys that ran the label. And I was sort of part and parcel of the Undercover Music Group that Eucatech was owned or run by the Undercover Music Group, and Undercover were also. They were a much bigger German company, and they were an umbrella company that also dealt with really big labels like Noom and Future Wax and Audio, which was obviously Chris Liebing's first label, and all those kind of really big, some of them really seminal labels. And yeah, so being a part of that group was pretty cool. Although, to be honest with you, yeah, it didn't really all work out quite as well as I might have wanted to. But there you go. Yeah, 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 yeah. That's right. Yeah, yeah. Um, it really happened when hydraulics happened, and that's my label, and that was mostly to do with Chris Liberator, who had been a long time collaborator and a long time friend, and we'd hung out many times in the studio, and it was becoming pretty apparent to Chris that my taste in music was changing as I was getting more and more. I was a very open book at the beginning, you know. I was just like, yeah, just throw it at me. I'm really up for working out how to make this music, and people would come in with records and say, oh, I want to make something like this. I'm like, oh, okay, and I'd try and reverse engineer it as best I could, and I got better and better at doing that as time went on. And my first efforts were pretty scrappy, but as things went on, but in a way, like, I quite like the first efforts because they're not right, and they're sort of quite unique, and they're quite original in their own way, you know, which I quite like about them. But yeah, I sort of as things, and as I started to sort of get a style, then eventually Chris kind of said to me, "You should start a label," you know, and I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. I should do, really. And he's like, "Look, we'll put the money up for it. You won't have to do anything. All you got to do is, you know, make some music like what you're doing right now, but just have a strong idea for it, have a good identity for it. You know, what we don't want is we don't want a label that just kind of mills around doing nothing for ages, or you don't, and I don't want a label where you give us really wildly different tracks, like some house tracks and then a breakbeat, and then, you know, because he knew I was into making all sorts of different styles of music just for the hell of it. So he was a bit like, no, try and get it, you know, sort of like, you know, focused on a style. And I did the first couple of tracks with Ant, um, and I was like, that's it, that's the sound. And we pretty much stuck on that sound pretty much all the way through. It's changed, you know, it's gone round and round in a huge circle, really. I mean, everything's slowed down a lot.
Is dance music a circular passion? Is it a weird washing machine of time where
Yeah,
disco has its, like, disco clearly had a strong moment, right? I mean, like, disco was 8, 10 years,
yeah,
you know, and then hard stop, and then it felt like it wasn't gonna really have a comeback, and then hey, Daft Punk, you know,
yeah.
and was that disco? Certainly nods to it,
Yeah,
but I mean, at the same
yeah.
time, that super strong 909 and some of the 303s. I mean, like,
Well, that
the
was
French house. You know,
It was
yes,
total techno, wasn't it? Some of it was
it may
so
have come from
bright,
disco, but when by
gritty.
the time it reached our eardrums, this
Yeah.
not really disco, and then maybe not so strong, and I felt like there was another comeback again, you know, early 2000s from Chicago with their hard house sound, Bad Boy Bill, Angel Alanis. This had the disco thing again.
Oh,
Do you
right.
understand what I'm saying? The same thing with the
Yeah.
303. I feel like the 303 was like, you know, higher state of consciousness. It was like really out there. Everyone wants
Yeah.
to use it. Then no 303. And then I don't
Yeah.
know, like
Yeah.
4 or 5 years later, be like, hey, remember this instrument? Be like, that's the 303. Be like, we love it. Let's bring it back.
Yeah.
I actually
It's
feel like the
funny, isn't it?
303 is here with us again, right
Yeah,
now.
totally.
Um,
Yeah.
the high BPMs that came from
Yeah.
Stay Up Forever,
Yeah.
hydraulics, and I guess acid techno. So here, actually, I'm maybe my brain's moving faster than what I want to say, which is, what is acid techno? Do you know where the name came from for the genre? Especially since all of the tracks did not use a 303, but they all did have a high BPM. Was high BPM associated with acid techno? I've got 4 or 5 questions inside there for you, Henry.
There's a weird. It's a bit of a weird sort of convoluted answer, really, isn't it?
Okay.
Because the thing is obviously if you go into right, so first off, if you start off just typing acid techno into Google, it'll take you to a Wikipedia page where it basically just talks about all the guys from Detroit, well, at least it used to, and it was a bit. I remember reading that and going a bit like, hang on a minute. I don't remember ever calling Detroit music acid techno. It would, you know, I mean, yeah, they used to use 303s and all that. I'm sure they did. But the thing is the actual acid techno phrase, I remember it mostly being like tagged on our music. That was what we used it. I don't remember it being around before we used it. Maybe it was. Maybe I was just unaware of it. I don't know. But I don't really remember it being like anyway, so that's that. But then now that's been sort of updated a bit. That page, it does actually finally include Liberator, but there aren't very many other Liberator pages on Wikipedia, so you won't find anything else about like me or Chris or anything like that. We keep talking about trying to do each other's pages, but we never get around to it because we can't be bothered. But but Acid Techno, yeah, I think that it was very from my perspective, the way I remember really Julian Liberator was the guy that really sort of was kind of came up with that because and it was his sort of he was annoyed that we were getting tagged as acid trance. And Julian was very like, we're not acid trance. We just aren't. If you listen to all the acid trance records that were being made at that time, we were not it. We were something different. You know, acid trance was like Heart House and Noom and various other sort of German labels that had a much more melodic approach to their sound, and it was much more tuneful. Everything was much more tuneful, and when they had acid in there, all the acid was quite tuneful as well. Whereas our stuff was a bit clunkier, and it was harder, and there was a techno influence in there, and although it was structured a bit more like sort of trance records, we didn't feel that acid trance really got it. So acid techno was the kind of so when we started, I think it was probably around about the time when, yeah, we actually started to use the phrase acid techno on some of the promotion that went out with Stay Up Forever Records. That was the difference, you know, and I think that when we made the first CD, which was like, it's not intelligent, you know, like, it's not intelligent, it's not from Detroit, but it's fucking having it. CD, if I'm allowed to swear, you know, that was, I think there was a tagline on there that said something like, you know, view into the underworld of the London's acid techno underworld or something like that. And that was kind of, and then there was some tracks that were made about acid techno, and you know, it started to become a bit of a phrase, and we sort of took that as being like, this is our style, this is what we call ourselves, we are called acid techno. And as far as I was aware, there was, and no one else was really using that. But then obviously, the internet being what it is, full of people that seem to know better. You know, someone's found, I don't know. So there you go. I mean, anyway, that's my opinion of what acid techno is all about, and trying to distinguish ourselves from the not that we were really sort of anti-trance. It's just we just really didn't really feel that really kind of covered us. You know, trance was a different scene as well. You know, if you went into a trance club and played acid techno, they wouldn't like it. You know, it didn't work. I mean, we tried, and it didn't work. Well, maybe okay, maybe sometimes it did, but quite often it didn't. You know, we used to go and play Escape from Samsara and things like that, and occasionally you get it right, but you had to really soften up the music and make things melodic for the trance crowd because it wasn't really their thing. You know, so it was quite an interesting. Decision, I thought. So I put that squarely in Julian's court for coming up with that idea, and I still agree with it.
Thanks for the recall. It's absolutely no, it's awesome. I mean, like if there's not actually a wiki for it, it's great that we've got this tale from you right now.
Yeah.
How long would you say that this journey took from the moment that you started the moniker, the alias for Dave the Drummer, adopted the acid techno name for the genre that you were about to output? How long would you say this took before the records were reaching out and you started getting the call internationally to leave the UK and start playing in other nations?
Was probably well. I mean, I started playing as a live set, as a live act, and you know,
Before the
Chris asked.
DJ,
Oh yeah. I wasn't a DJ.
you were carting
Yeah,
around the Access
uh,
virus and
I
wow.
was carting around an S1100 sampler, a 909, a couple of 303s, a mixer, some rack. effects units, one of which I think I've still got, and I had the most ridiculous live setup. Plus, I had an actual computer with a CRT monitor as well. Sometimes, but mostly just shows in London. But we used to do stuff at squat parties, and squat parties used to be quite secure because, like I said, because of the loophole in the law and everything, you were allowed to secure these places. So we used to have security and stuff like that. So yeah, it wasn't like you were going to get busted anytime soon. So I'd show up with all my studio kit and do a live show, and we'd hook that all up to the PA and I'd play. And that was basically what I did. But then, I slowly started getting bookings, and I was getting a bit like, look, I'm getting a bit I'm kind of taking the studio to pieces every weekend and putting it back together is getting a bit old, and things are starting to break, and my equipment's starting to really look a bit beaten up, and I could start investing in like hundreds of pounds worth of flight cases, but I'm not really feeling this anyway. And I did a few abroad shows. I started getting a couple of gigs. Went over to Brazil. We started doing that.
What year was this?
This was 99, 98, 99. It's all around about that time because I remember when I moved studios from the place I had in Deptford, which was where we started off, which was a shared studio with a bunch of guys, and I moved out of there. I took my stuff and some of the gear that was already in the studio. It's a bit of a long story, but the guy that owned the place just basically wanted me to look after it, and I moved over to a studio in Brick Lane, which is quite a famous little area in the corner of East London, which is a sort of a very like Indian sort of area. It's got a sort of kind called Bangla Town, actually they call it now. It's got a big Bangladeshi community there, famous for having lots of food, restaurants and stuff like that. And there was this kind of arts community centre bang in the middle of it called the Truman Brewery, which was an old brewery, which was a massive building, as you can imagine. And the guy had just bought it and needed tenants. So we found out about it, me and Steve from Smitten Records, and we went over, and Laurie actually from Rootmaster Records, and we all went over there, and I set up my studio. And while I was there, that was a really big leaping off point for lots of projects. And lots of things happened in that very short space of time I was in there. I was only there for like, I think maximum 18 months, but I did loads and loads of work while I was there, lots of gigging as well, and taught myself how to DJ. Went and bought some decks, and I'd already practiced a bit at my old place, but I never really had proper techniques. So I went and bought myself some techniques and taught myself how to DJ, and I used to regularly play. And then I started saying to people when they were asking me to come and play a live set, I'd be like, I can DJ. And I started off playing like side rooms, and I started off like doing the really small stuff, like doing like the little side room for warm up slots and everything. These were gigs through my mates who knew full well that I could play in the middle of the night a live set, but I didn't want to play a DJ set in the middle of the night. I sort of refused to do it and said, look, I'll do the warm up slot.
What was the apprehension to doing the show in the middle of the night? Why were you?
I just did not feel like I was ready for it, mixing wise, and also just like I learned about raving and electronic music through Chris and the other Liberators and the rest, and D.A.V.E, DDR, and all those. And not all of those guys were DJs, but Chris was obviously, and the Liberator DJs were all DJs. Not everybody else was actually a DJ. And I learned about raving by going out and watching them play. So I wasn't a raver before that. I hadn't been standing in clubs watching DJs and not at all. And I'd been playing drums in a band, so so going over and going to clubs and watching my mates play our records for the first time was a pretty mind blowing. And then of course I started getting into how they were playing them and what they chose to mix together and why. And sometimes, and then of course, eventually I started getting critical about it and think, well, hang on a minute, maybe you shouldn't have played those two together. I reckon you should have played that one, And then of course I thought, well, and then eventually I got the bug, and I'm like, well, I've got to try it out for myself now. So I had to go and I bought some decks. I was buying records anyway, and of course I stepped up that and started buying a lot more records and just started mixing. And I didn't have a massive record collection, so that was another thing. A lot of people start off like DJs have started off, they were collecting records for years beforehand, and they had all these records, and then they're like, I know what, I'll be a DJ, But for me, it was completely the opposite. I didn't have any records at all, and I was like, I really want to start DJing because people keep calling me to ask me to come and play live, but I can't handle the stress of it anymore. So I sort of, yeah, and of course I was getting copies of all the records that I was making, and we were making quite a lot. So I had music to play. It was there on vinyl, so I just needed to go out and play it. But
Has all
yeah,
of this
so
has this all this music been transferred digitally? I don't mean by you personally. Have these labels uh
funnily enough, funnily enough, I am just in the process of starting to do that now. I've got all my old DATs, and I'm actually running one off as we speak. I've got the DAT machine and my laptop set up in a sort of permanent loop of me, and I'm actually, because I've done this a few times before, but I'm actually marking each DAT off now and name. You should say you could say, well, I should have done that last time. Well, I didn't.
no, no,
I
no,
just
it's
I
it's
I
why I'm
just
bringing it
took off
up.
tracks occasionally.
I mean,
But
it
now I'm running off whole DATs as one file into my computer, one after another after another. I've got about 150 here. I've done about 20. It shouldn't take too much longer to do it.
it's just, I mean, because we
Uh,
brought
you
up the
know,
wiki thing earlier in our chat here, and I then you shared the story, which was awesome because it's a big gap to be filled, and I think to myself about the mislabeled. I mean, to me, Detroit techno is Detroit techno. That's not acid techno. I'm sure that there's acid techno that's come from Detroit, but it's always been Detroit techno. That's, in fact,
yeah,
I find that
right.
that's
That's
the
kind of what
distinction
I thought.
between Detroit and Chicago. Chicago was the house. And yes, Chicago had
Yeah,
techno anyway, but I was saying Chicago was the house, and then Detroit, that was the techno,
that was
right?
the techno.
And
Yeah.
predominantly, if I think about it, I mean, even though the abbreviations are the same, underground resistance, because I've got UR for utility room, but UR
Yeah,
from Detroit. I mean, like this is Detroit. Knights of the Jaguar, DJ
yeah,
Rolando. I mean, like this is it. And it was more
yeah,
melodic. That wasn't to say that Detroit didn't have slap and shit that came out of it. Yes, it did. And Jeff
yeah, it
Mills, it
did totally.
was. I mean,
But you wouldn't. Yeah, I don't. It didn't really quite sit.
and
When I read it on Wikipedia, it was the first time I'd ever heard anybody call Detroit techno
you
acid
must have
techno.
had
I
a
was
bit of
like,
like a sticker
huh?
shock moment, like what I call sticker shock. You see a sticker price and you go, "Whoa, hey," but like you must have
What?
been reading
Hang
the
on,
wiki
that's
and had that.
wrong.
Yeah, that's not be like I'm not looking at this. I'll tell you what, Henry, is what it's making me think of. It's making me think about the explosion of tidy tracks
Oh
and
yeah,
what was
yeah.
the other new energy? And that's just it. To me, that was new energy because
Vicious Circle.
I'm thinking of Tony
Was
D.A.V.E.
yeah.
And
Okay. Yeah.
that was new energy, but then all of a sudden it became hard house.
Hard House. That's
And
right.
meanwhile, back here in North America,
UK Hard House. It
we
became
that I thought
UK.
that's what we were doing was hard house.
That's right.
I'm
Yeah, it was
standing
just
on the
quite
shoulders of
important to
DJ
have the
Dan and Donald
UK in
fucking.
front of it. Yeah, yeah, because I remember Chris bringing some what he called hard house, which was Dutch hard house. There was a really, really cool wave of Dutch hard house that was coming, which now would be sort of like thrown into the tech house bin, but it wasn't. It was house music with this kind of Dutch kind of vibe to it. I don't know what I can't really describe it too well, but it was hard.
Right.
And I remember Chris was really influenced by it. I think we were listening to things
House
like
speeds, but
House Speeds were really tough,
here's
like
the hammer.
driving
Right.
grooves,
Here's the hammer.
quite dirty production, and quite ravey as well. But yeah, it had a house vibe to it, and it was they were largely coming out on Dutch labels. And Chris was really like, "This is this," and we were listening to things like Laid Back Luke
So I'm
and
still
Dark
listening to Laid Back
Pronto.
Luke.
I know, but he was
Awesome
at that
sauce.
time. It was like somebody that was, I don't know what, that was something that Chris was. The thing is to be honest, all these DJ genres at the time, I've got to be honest, that I was really ignorant of it all because wasn't coming at music from that angle at all. So when I first met Chris and Liberator guys, they kind of brought me up to scratch on which type of music is what, and this is called this, and this is called that, and this guy does this, but he doesn't do that. Don't ever say that he does that because he does this, and don't get this wrong. And and I'm like, right, okay, right, okay, that's that. And what's that again? That's it, right, okay, and I'm just sort of, I had no idea what was going on, but I learned obviously slowly as time went on, which explains the whole sort of like acid trance sort of phenomenon. That's why they were getting. Yeah, I didn't really care about it too much. I didn't really see what the big fuss was about, but there was a fuss, and I understand it now. But I remember Julian being very like, no, we don't want to be put in with those guys. It's not the right place.
I
And I
feel
was
like
like, okay.
Beatport's now the thermometer for responsibility on these genre
Yeah.
names for better
Yeah,
or worse. I mean, I know that a lot of my stuff is gone into categories where I just look at it and go, oh yeah, at 110
yeah, I
at
know,
110 beats per minute, you're gonna call that peak techno, hey? Oh, okay, sure.
man. It's a never. I've given
Why
up the
not
battle
hide the
now.
track so that no one ever finds it when they're going into the show?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Why don't you just take them all down? You might as well. Might as well just have the
I'm making
500
fun. I'm
tracks.
making fun. I love Beatport. I was just shopping on it this morning. I'm thinking about you recollecting all the tracks, going through your DATs, transferring everything. Are you adding
Yeah,
remasters? Are you making the stuff sound current? Are you
I
leaving
will
it
do.
for the
Yeah.
for the way it sounded in the moment and be like that was the moment, so here's the sound?
No, no, no. I'll go through it all and remaster it definitely, but carefully and gently. I've remastered stuff in the past, and I got caught up in the loudness wars, which was happening. That's really backed off a lot recently, which is great. It's good to see the back of that, because and yeah. And I think actually what's interesting is you're talking about is tying all that together with Beatport and then the latest. The latest phase of hard techno and which is actually trance. But that sort of sound is quite interesting because some of the guys that are sitting at the top of the hard trance techno charts at the moment are have got a very 90s sound to their music, and they're not like slamming the compressors like they used to, like we were doing maybe 5 years ago or so. And it's quite interesting because now with some of my stuff on the DAT, and I'm taking that and listening to it, and I'm thinking, God, it's really, really, really close to what we were doing. I mean, the thing that the way that you can tell the two styles apart is that there are more elements of detail in the newer stuff than there is in the older stuff. We just didn't have you couldn't have that much stuff going on in some of those older tracks. You just didn't have that much equipment
Or the
at your
processor couldn't
fingertips,
handle it.
or the processors and all that, and you didn't have you just couldn't do it. So like the tracks might come across as sounding a little bit more basic, but essentially it's a very similar sound, and they've even changed the mastering sound, so the mastering sounds it's backed off a little bit, and it sounds a little bit more like mastering with all the full dynamic range like you would do for vinyl in the 90s, rather than like it's still loud, but it's not as slammed as it was. And that's quite interesting.
What
That's
about
quite
the
interesting.
reference for music today? Do you find yourself checking your phone without headset, just on your phone and listening to a track? Are you there? Has the phone
Mm,
become the ultimate reference speaker for music?
no, not for me. I don't really listen to music on my phone unless yeah, unless it's a mix. Like sometimes, obviously, there's a lot of live streams around at the moment. Sometimes me and Justine, we get the phones out and we get them going in the kitchen if we're cooking something and one of our mates is playing a live stream. But when it comes to listening to music, nah. I mean, I'll have a phone going on in the background if I'm doing DIY in the house. That's about as far. Even then, I'll normally plug it into something decent so I can listen to. I can't stand listening to music when it hasn't got any bass. It just drives me nuts. So yeah, not really. I mean, with headphones, okay, but on phone speakers, I know lots of people just walk around with phones. I just don't get it.
You've had an incredible journey, and you've shared only a piece of it with us here on the show. You mentioned at the start of it that you were a musician and maybe not so much a DJ and became a DJ. Would you think of yourself as a DJ now?
Yeah, definitely. I saw a really funny cartoon actually on Facebook the other day, and it's a bloke walking up to he's walking. It's two guys. One guy standing outside the door, and written above the door is something like venue or pub or something like that. And this guy walks up to him and he says, "Yeah, mate, I'm a DJ. You got any music that needs putting on, or any levels that need pushing up and down?" And I just thought that was really funny because that is kind of all that DJs are. And there was a huge comment discussion going, raging below that. People just say, "Yeah, DJs, they're not real musicians." But I've been surrounded by real musicians, really, really real musicians, like all my life. My parents are both musicians. They're both pianists. They're both amazing. My mum's a piano teacher. My father works he's a musical arranger who's worked in the West End with Andrew Lloyd Webber. My brother is also an amazing pianist. So, and I'm a drummer. So there you go. I'm the one that's not that never really learned the piano properly. I can play, but I'm dreadful. But the thing is because I've been surrounded by musicians. When I saw the first time I started watching DJs playing, the first thing that went through my mind was, wow, these people are musicians. I never really realized it. But when you see someone who's really skillful in the way that they play music to people, and you're like, it sounds ridiculous, and a lot of people can't get their heads around it, but it's true. You see someone, not everyone can do it, and sync or no sync doesn't matter. It does not matter. It's choice of music and time and space and the people you're playing it to and all of that. So in that way, I would say, yeah, I am a DJ because I have learned how to do it. And that's why I chose not to do that at the beginning, because I understood immediately that was the bit I was scared of. I wasn't scared of the technique. I was scared of not getting it right for people who were having a great time. And I knew that promoters would go, "Oh, great, we've got Dave the drummer. Right, let's put him on at 2 a.m, which would be peak time in a London party." And I thought, I'm not ready to do that because I'm still struggling with my musical taste. Part of me really wanted to play like deep or slower records, or records that had like some melody in them, or I hadn't really quite got into the really focused frame of mind that you need to be in when you're a DJ. You need to focus on the style that you're going to play, and you need to get that right. If you're going to take people on a bit of a journey and you're going to do a left turn halfway through your set and play some drum and bass, you better be bloody ready to deal with the fallout. You know what I mean? And if you're a really good DJ, you'll be able to do it. Like someone like Laurent Garnier will testify to that. But like for most DJs, they make it easy for themselves and they stick to a sort of focused kind of pattern, so that's what I learned. For me, it felt like learning an instrument, But that wouldn't mean that I'm an amazing DJ at all styles, but I'm good at playing my thing. And I think it's the same for all DJs. I've seen drum and bass DJs, hung out with loads of drum and bass DJs over the years, and they're a bit like that with techno. They're like, "Oh, guys, I just don't know how you play that stuff." I get it with drum and bass, but I wouldn't know where to start with techno. And it's the same the other way around. So it's quite interesting. It is like learning an instrument. The style of music that you learn is the instrument, not necessarily the actual turntables. That's just a vehicle.
Henry, thanks, man. Really appreciate you being with us today. This is the
Oh,
cat.
thanks for calling.
Yeah, well,
Brilliant.
the catch up is great, but the history. You know what's really funny? I'm thinking of this as right now. I try hard to do the shows and keep them within an hour. Obviously, some have gone past. Some conversations have been even a little bit shorter than ours, you know, but I try to keep within an hour. I think to myself, people get, if they're watching on their phones, they'll get a hand or a wrist fatigue.
Yeah.
Or if they're just watching TV, they're asking a little tired, be like, okay, I'm watching these DJs, they're talking. Okay, I've had enough talk, I want to go. But I feel like an hour is a good time where we can sit and hang out with each other before I should say, hey,
That was
listen.
good.
And while I'm
That was
thinking that,
always
I'm
good.
like, we need a sequel to this because I I
Okay.
I feel like I did a bit of scratching, and that there's way more on this card to scratch off.
Well, I could definitely waffle. I know that
I
much,
no
but
no no I intentionally loving it. This is true. I think it's great. I think to myself also, I've got a big question here. Are you a
yeah.
raver?
Am I a raver? Yeah, I suppose I am. I have become one, really. Yeah. I mean, I've just been at so many and played at so many, and I'm a bit reluctant in some ways. I don't always go the whole hog, but then I think, you just you just have to go where you feel. The one thing I like about the whole electronic music scene is that you can kind of do as little or as much as you want. That's what I've always felt. There's no rules. You don't have to do anything. I like the fact that you can just show up when you feel like it and go home when you feel like it. You can go to a rave for half an hour if you want. I've seen people do that. I've seen people do that, literally drop the kids off at school kind of thing, pop to the rave quickly, hang out with their mates, maybe have a beer or something, and then go off because they've got to go and do something else. I've seen loads of people do that. Gigs aren't like that. Gigs are much more like, you have to go watch the band and, clap, and everything. Well, I like the idea that none of those rules are there. So I suppose I am a raver, really. Yeah, in a way. When Rave found me, I was like, oh, where have you been all my life? So yeah, I suppose I am.
Will the acid techno and techno adventures continue with you? Are you how often are you making music, and what's that output like?
It's been God, I suppose as I've got older, it's got more and more difficult to make really regular music. And I do a lot of other things now as well: sample packs, tutorials. I write some TV stuff as well, all sorts of bits and bobs. And I do quite a lot of remixes, which are easier than writing a track
Sure,
of your own, a bit quicker to get through. So I
absolutely.
can do stuff like that. But yeah, no, I'm writing probably more than I have done for a long time, and yeah, it's going well. I think it's just trying to keep the wheels turning. Obviously, with what's been going on, no gigs. Yeah, I mean, lost all. I had a really pretty serious year. You might think that all my years are pretty serious, but they're not actually. Some years are better than others. And 2020 was supposed to be a pretty banging year. I had some great festivals and stuff lined up. Of course, all of it got cancelled. So that was obviously really really disappointing. And I'm hoping that it's all going to come back, but I think it will. But I think it's going to come back in a very different shape and
Sure,
form.
it's going to
And
be different, but we're going head first into a super giant party that could potentially last a year and a half or
yeah,
2 years for people to get their willies out. Because someone's going to be like, you can just imagine, at home, ring ring, be like, hey man, you want to go to the party? Be like, yeah, yeah, I do.
yeah,
Be like, I don't care who's playing. I'm going, yeah, just take me, let's go. Like that's I feel like
yeah.
where all of us are headed.
I
If
think
people
so.
want to
Yeah.
check you out right now and listen to some Dave the Drummer, where should they go to?
Well, probably start with my Facebook page, really, because we do a regular Sunday show, and we just obviously just did one just this Sunday, just gone. And there's one every week. So if go on my Facebook page, and if there's no scheduled show, just wait until kind of Wednesday, Thursday, and I normally schedule one. But anyway, just come and catch us on a Sunday. me and Justine, my wife, in the studio, banging out some techno from 6 o'clock in the evening, UK time, to around about 8. It's only a couple of hours. But I play all the latest new stuff that I've managed to get my hands on, and I play a few old ones. I play a bit of vinyl, and I play, USBs, and we joke and dance about and turn the lights off sometimes and dance around in silly glasses.
Go into a utility room.
Yeah.
Is this not the best hot
We
water
don't.
tank you've ever seen?
It is.
Right.
It is a very nice hot water tank. That's.
It's how I riff. This is Dave the drummer, Henry Cullen. Utility Room is the show. My name is Jello. You are absolutely awesome, sauce, and fantastic. I really appreciate you being with us. Thank you very much. Henry, don't hang up, but you don't touch that dial. We'll see you next week.